any guys listening to this, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing better than you can do for your daughter, for your wife, for the women in your life than to love them and bring your masculine energy in a loving way and forget about all of those things where you can't show emotions. Show it, let it out, show your love, because it means everything and will make all the difference in the way that girl becomes a woman and relates to men. It will make all the difference in her life.
Today's guest on the Sport is Life podcast is Kimberly Cain. She's worked with some of the biggest names in TV, in music. She's an author, but the part I was drawn most to is the work that she's done coaching men on their personal lives while participating in sport. Really powerful stuff. There's a heap of really good information on meditation, especially if you're just getting started. And I want you to pay special attention to using intuition in sport specifically, but in everyday life as well. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality. Find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Hey Kimberly, how are you?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, great to be here. We've just had a good old laugh before we've jumped on. So many similarities to our story. The intuitive side, you said you're a lifelong athlete. I can relate to that. You're into music, although I can't claim to be an artist like yourself, and worked in television. So many synchronicities here already. I want to start by talking about, because we are going to dive into sport, but one of the real sort of misunderstood areas of sport, I believe, is this intuitive side of us. So tell me, when you say you are intuitive, explain that to the listeners and viewers, what that means to you and how they, in a way, they can understand.
Yeah. We're all intuitive and we're all psychic, if you will. But the reason I like to use the term intuitive is because there's sometimes a negative connotation that goes along with psychics. People, the whole, old movies where it's like, look into my crystal ball kind of thing, and nobody needs that. You really don't. And intuition is really at work on a higher level. So when I say we're all psychic, especially children, so there are not those barriers that prevent us from connecting to higher level energies. Like just an easy example would be connecting to an animal. If you're a person who's ever had an animal, you're like, is that a person in that animal suit right there? Like, is how did you know exactly? It's like he seemed to know exactly what I was thinking right there, because there's a higher level of communication that goes beyond words, and we pick it up in so many different ways. But most people have that sense very blocked. They see the five senses, smell, taste, hearing, sight, as what is real. If it's right in front of me, it's real. And that's not necessarily the truth, because our perceptions a lot of times lead us to see or hear things that may actually be a little bit different than what's being presented, let's say, by the other person. But as we build our intuitive muscles, we can come to a greater understanding of how to communicate well with others. For instance, what they may be saying may not be exactly what they're feeling, and they may not know how to say that. But as we build our intuitive skills, we can perceive better what's being said there and handle our emotions better. So, it's so deep, but that's just a little touch in.
Love it. And I think the thing that you mentioned there at the end is the most powerful part that people can take away from what I've seen and experienced is when everyone's got that intuitive ability, but how often do they not trust it? How often do they you said they see beyond what was actually said, and they get a sense of things, or I had that gut feeling that I should have done this or I shouldn't have done that, but I didn't listen, and then I regretted it. And it's that ability to really trust, which is a key part, right?
It really is. And then coming to an understanding also, because it can also become very fascinating to people where they kind of dive off the cliff a little too far and everything is about psychism and intuition, and they're not balancing that with practical boots on the ground, the way to walk in the world on a daily basis. And like in Sedona, Arizona, which is an amazing place to pick up energy, and you can really feel it there. And if somebody wants to Google it, if they don't know about it, you can Google like vortexes in Sedona. You can really feel the changes in energy in different areas. And so there is a real thing there about, you'll hear helicopters and somebody will go, well, somebody walked off the side of a mountain, because they're just so blissed out that they're not paying attention to what is right there in front of them. So it's really about balancing both and understanding how to do that.
Yeah, I love that. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about today is how you are using sport in your coaching to help people create shifts. Now, before we get into that, I want to ask you, as the link to sport, is that I see it all the time, these intuitive sports people, and they talk about it. They go, I just kind of do it. I don't really know what I'm doing. I just do it. They don't have a context for it. Is that something that you can explain to people how they can? Because you've referenced it a couple of times where you said they can't see what's right in front of them. So how would someone in that moment, when they have that intuitive ability, whether it's to spot a gap, whether it's they need to throw a certain pass or whatever it is, like how do they be conscious and aware of that enough to be able to have a bit of control over that intuition?
I love it. I mean, I love this subject so much. So, and there's so many places that I could go with this, but let me just start by saying any high level activity. Okay. So I'm an athlete, but I've also been a performing musician for a lifetime. And the same thing happens. And as a speaker, a public speaker, the same thing happens in all of those arenas. That's why I say it's not relegated to one activity. It's more about entering what in music and in sports, what we call being in the zone. And as an artist, artists can talk about the muse, or any time that you enter into that zone, or it's an elevated brain state, it's a change in brainwave patterns. So at an elevated state, we have access to universal consciousness, to information that is not stored or has not been previously learned by us. Because let's face it, I mean, there's so much more that we don't know than what we do know for each one of us. So sometimes you run into a thing, you go, I don't know how I knew that. How did I know that? Because it's in the universal consciousness, and we're all connected like a web, an energetic web. So when you allow yourself to relax and let go and not be fearful, you can feel the fear, but it's about feel fear and do it anyway. Push through it, because that is not a real thing most of the time. Sometimes it is, but 95% of the time, what we're afraid of is not a real thing. It's a mental construct. Okay. So when we can recognize that and say, okay, there's probably everything I'm conjuring up here is not even going to happen. It's not even a reality. Let me just push through it. And I'm going to use an example of my sport. So I am a slalom course water skier. So I ski an obstacle course, which is, it's a crazy high-speed elite sport. Okay. So it's just the G's are awesome. So the deal is, if you're in your thinking mind, you can really get hurt when you're doing that. So let's say I'm in the water and I'm ready for the boat to pull me up. If I am thinking about, oh my gosh, did I lock the front door before I left? Or, oh, am I prepared for that meeting tomorrow? Guess what? I need to stop right there, because that's a signal that I am not in alignment and not present with what I'm doing. And I could get seriously injured that way. So I allow myself to clear all of that mental chatter and first go into a zone and into a space. It's like a meditative state where I feel the water around me. And you can use this with anything. If you're a rock climber, then you're feeling the rocks in the mountain. Or if you're a football player, then you're connecting with the ball and the people around you. You can use it in any way. But for me, I'm connecting with the water. I'm feeling the water on my skin. And at some point, I and the water are the same thing. There ceases to be a boundary that's there. And so I speak to the water, and I speak to my ski, to the boat, to the driver, to the rope. Every single thing is connected in an alignment. And when we are working together, there's this harmonious activity that happens there. So as I come up out of the water, then I look at the obstacle course in front of me, and what I see, instead of seeing the obstacles, okay, because I'm going to flow around them like this. Instead of seeing the obstacles, and let me just say right here, anybody can relate to this if you drive a car, bicycle, anything. If you look at the obstacle, you are going to drive right into it.
Yeah.
So instead of skiing, instead of seeing the obstacle, okay, which is like this right in front of me, I look at the spaces between, so that I am moving into the spaces. And that is like all of life. Every obstacle that you see before you, bird's eye view, see the spaces, and problems can just disappear right there in an instant. It's an amazing state to be in. And it's also science, because guess what? Your endorphins, serotonin, all the feel good chemicals and hormones are lighting up. So your brain is in this heightened state. And when it's like, woo!
I love that. There's so many things I want to unpack from that. It made me think of one of my was my best mate growing up. We play cricket here. I don't know how familiar you are with cricket, but he was an elite batsman, and he talked about, like, he said, I don't know why people look around at the fielders. I look at the gaps. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, that is so simple, but it's what most people walk through life, looking at the problems, the obstacles, instead of trying to find the gaps. And how you've described that will work, whether it's sport, whether it's their work, family. It's like, let's look for the good stuff. Let's look for the next opportunity. That's powerful. Have you seen Steve Kotler's book, The Rise of Superman?
Yes, and I have Nar Country sitting on my table right now. Yeah, his latest one, I believe. Yeah.
Amazing. He's got some amazing stuff. But what you described there was a lot of what he talked about. Mm-hmm. The increase in human performance in all fields is like a really steady rise, but in extreme sports, it's an exponential curve. And he described it similar to what you were saying. I just got the cat here saying hello. He described it as they become one with all of their surroundings. And one of the examples you would remember from the book, when he talked about the guys in the wingsuit that had to fly in formation through this gap between buildings or whatever, and like being completely present and having that the detail around what they needed to do, so that in the moment they could just be in the moment. Like, fascinating.
Because if you take time to go into your thinking mind, boom, crash, it's over. You can't dip down into the thing, because they're literally in the world of time, which we rise above when we get into that zone. In the world of time, the amount of time that it literally takes to think, and for the thoughts, the synapses the thought to move across synapses in the brain, that time then, you're already too late. But when you move into this zone, I saw this incredible, going back to the intuitive piece, and you can see it once you tune your own intuition. You can see it happening with other people. And I if I'd known we were going to go here, I would have looked it up beforehand, because it's a great example. So I can't remember the player, but this was a University of Texas football game, which is my alma mater, Hook 'em Horns. And so I'm watching the game, and I'm watching it on TV, and they're way behind. Okay, it's like, and we're down to that Hail Mary, we're down to like the millisecond before the clock runs out, and they're lining up. And most people would be like, this game's over. You see people getting up, they walk away from the game. It's over. It's done. Yeah. I'm looking at it. I see, as the camera zooms in, just the slightest, most subtle change on the quarterback's face. Barely perceptible. But I saw it, and I went, he just entered the zone. They're going to win this game. You just watch what happens right here. And boom, that ball snapped. Bam, done, over. They win the game. And I saw it happening just prior to it happening in the world of time, right? And it's so exciting when that happens. So you can witness it.
Absolutely. I had goosebumps all through that. And anyone who's played any sport has had a moment where they've experienced it, where
crazy,
exactly
isn't it?
It blocks off all of those thinking processes, and it's happening automatically. And I love it's hard to describe, but it's like it's happening in slow motion, but it's also happening in an instant. In your brain, it's just happening slow motion. You know what you're going to do. You don't have to think about it. You just know you're going to do it. You already know what the final result's going to be. They're those magic moments. Do you have, because Steve Kotler talks about the 4 stages of flow, and he talks about a whole lot of different ways that you can find it. From my experience, there are a number of ways you can. Do you have like a clear sort of process that you would help people identify how they would find that flow easier, whether it be sport or in other parts of their life?
Yeah, there are so many ways, really, and it's very individual. And let's say if I'm coaching an individual or a small group, then I can really hone in on what is going to get that or those individuals to that state. But just in general terms, what I can say is that probably the number one method is going to be through meditation. And meditation is something that so many people shy away from, because I've tried, I don't know how to do it, I can't clear my mind. I sit down and I start to meditate, and I'm like, this home state, and then all these thoughts come creeping in.
Yeah.
So what they're not understanding is that that's normal. It is not, meditation is not about clearing all thoughts, because it is not going to happen.
Yeah.
What it's about is putting yourself in a state and saying, I'm going to set aside this time to train myself and to enter into a place of peace. It's really self-care is what it is. And care for our loved ones, for those around us, because meditation has been shown to have exponential effects over time. So let's say you start and you've got all these thoughts creeping in, and you really only get 30 seconds max of a peaceful mind, where you're picturing yourself walking through a beautiful field, and there's a nice, beautiful flowing breeze, and all is right with the world. You get 30 seconds. You know what? Congratulations. Because next time, you may get 45 seconds and then a minute. And before you know it, you got 15 minutes. And that 15 minutes may be broken up into segments with thoughts that you're in that beautiful field and you're experiencing. And oh, wait a minute, what is this? There's my kid is suddenly running through my scene and going, I need help. Okay, all right, great. I see you, love you. But right now I'm in the field. So you just keep letting it, staying in the flow and bringing yourself, what I call, back to center. All right. So that's the number one way. I actually created some movement meditations, is what I call them, because it can be very difficult for some people to even quiet the mind, even for a few minutes. They actually, each of our brains, operates differently. Same type of brain, but different things turn on different areas of our brains. So some people, this would go to why I love speed in my sport of skiing, because when I'm in that zone of speed, where a lot of people, that sense of speed may make them feel totally out of control. For me, then it puts me into that zone and everything, as you said, goes into slow motion around me. So I thought, okay, what about for people like that who have trouble meditating? I created some movement meditations where I have rhythm patterns that start very, very slow, so that instead of trying to clear your mind, you're actually focusing on the rhythm pattern itself. And it's very slow. There's some that are faster. People love to start there because their mind is busier. But then I eventually get them back to the ones that have a lot of space in between. And that can take you very quickly and very powerfully into that altered state.
Love it. Love it. It's called a meditation practice for a reason, right? Because it's like whether you're talking about sport or any field, it's like you have to practice it and you have to get better. And I love what you said there. It's an exponential effect over time. I got into meditation. You mentioned the impact it has on your family, because I was angry and I wrote in my journal, I wanted, how do I change this? And then I stumble across, we talk about focusing on what you want to focus on. With that focus, I accidentally, of course, no accidents, find this book that is a sports book, but introduces me to meditation. And wow, actually meditation makes me calmer. And I had the same experience of what you said. I'm starting to learn about meditation and they're saying you got to clear your mind. And that wasn't my experience at all. And that's why, I don't know if you've created the same thing, but I've created training to help people see that it's not about trying to clear the mind. It's actually about allowing the mind, giving it space. And as you described, it's that even if it's 30 seconds of that bliss, it's going to set you up for your whole day.
Yes.
And I look at it from a sporting perspective, if you want to call it visualization or whatever you want to call it. It's that if meditation sounds scary, then call it visualization. And it's the same thing in terms of your preparation for the day. And I love, I take my sporting teams through that before we start the game, is through a quick visualization to help them feel more relaxed and grounded, to see what they're going to do beforehand. You mentioned how speed, that presence comes on board. I was thinking about the kart racing. Will Power's the Australian guy over there, and I heard him interviewed talking about it's 300 miles an hour they're doing on those open tracks. Now, for the Australians, that's like, do the math, right? That's like 400 and whatever kilometers an hour. That's ridiculous. But he talked about how you have to just be present and you have to find the gaps. You have to trust. So if they can do that at speed, bringing it back to a basic level that we can, it should be easy, right?
It should be easy. And here's the thing, there's a difference between simple and easy, right?
Yeah.
So things that are simple, they're so simple that it makes us go, what is wrong with me for not getting that?
Yeah.
But it's because it's not easy. And anything worthwhile requires, as you said, it requires practice. It requires, and then also some people shy away from practice. I don't need more stuff to do. Then let's just call it attention. what we put our attention on is what is going to grow in our lives. So if we spend time in negative thinking and worrying every day about what may happen with this and what may happen with that and what somebody said to me or did to me or what I failed to do, that's what our life will be like. We will have more of that because that's where the attention is. So one of the other tools that I use with people a lot, which is so simple, again, it is right there in front of you 100% of the time, is just go outside. Get your feet on the ground, especially barefooted. Now, where you are, that might not be a great idea today. It's a little too cold.
Yeah.
But even so, bundle up and get outside and look at the trees. Look at if there's snow on the ground. Look at the sunshine. Just recognize that you're not separate from nature. You are nature. You are a part of nature. And when you see that tree or those birds are not worried about a single thing, then it starts to bring that level of stress down, because as you recognize that you're a part of that, you're connected to it, you can really start to get a feeling that everything is going to be okay, that all is well. And it doesn't mean that we don't, a lot of people feel like because they want so much practicality, they're like, yeah, but you can't just sit there and meditate. No, you have to take action. You have to take action in your life. But what the meditation, and I'm going to say in here as well, prayer, because a lot of people see prayer as, they may not be religious, and so I don't pray or I don't know how to pray. That's fine. It simply is a dialogue, is all it is. So for me, I am in dialogue with God. You can call that higher power. You can call that the universe, whatever you want to call it. But what it is, regardless of what you call it, is it's the highest level of the energy of love, pure love. And that is where we want to tap into, because that's where all of our power comes from. That's where all of the goodness comes from that we can experience in our lives. So you can dialogue. You don't have to just sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to pray and meditate. You can just say, I'm going to go outside now and be present with everything that's there.
Love it. So good. I'm just trying to stay present here. So you talked about
you know what? That's the gift of animals right there. They're like, guess what? We're not going to get too serious, right? I'm going to switch my tail around in your face.
Yeah. So for the people who are listening and not watching, my cat here is he's trying to get my attention. Now, you talked about how cats or animals have that sort of intuitive. She's been rubbing against those books, and I'm like, okay, what do I need to pay attention to those books?
Yeah.
So the one she's pushed to the side,
If anybody's just listening to audio, they need to tune into the video like right here, because that is pretty funny to see cattail switching around.
Yeah. So people listening to this who maybe they're not so intuitive might be turning off now, going, what the fuck are these lunatics talking about?
What's going on?
But I tell you, this cat has helped me in coaching that many times where she's standing there staring at something, whether it's a word or a book, and I'm like, I asked the client, what does this mean to you? And they're like, oh my God, like, how did you know about that? I'm like, I don't know, it was the cat. Anyway, she's drawing me to the Andre Agassi book, Open, right? So the story I'm drawn to there is, I don't know if you've read it, but he talked about, I think he called it the dragon, the ball machine.
Okay.
The relentless, like his dad made him stand in front of this machine to the point that he hated the sport.
I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. He talked about how much he hated tennis.
Wow.
So I'm just going to do this. Let's go back to your sporting journey. You said to me you've been a lifelong athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Where did sports start for you?
Oh my goodness. Very, very natural. Okay. Wow. I'm getting this beautiful visual image right now. When I was a really little girl, my granddad and I would go out in the front yard, and he would pitch the ball to me because I loved softball. And he would pitch it to me, and I would catch and throw back to him. And first of all, I loved him. I was really connected to him. And that time spent with him was so special for me. And he would teach me this lesson, which again, it applies in all of life. He would say, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the ball. Turned out that I ended up being a home run hitter, and a lot of the other girls on my softball teams were a lot bigger than me. And I used to have a lot of fun when I would come up to bat, and my team, my coaches loved this. I would come up to bat. The other team with a lot of really athletic, bigger girls would go, move in, they're thinking, this is going to be easy. And I'd be like, yeah, move in. Go ahead, move in. And I'm like, because I know how to keep my eye on the ball because my granddaddy taught me. And so I would just be like slug that thing and all the way out of bounds, and everybody would come in. And so I learned to just love the physicality of sports, because I truly believe, and this is especially for a lot of women, that in order for us to be balanced, and I'm going to say this is men too, but I'm kind of speaking especially to women right now, in order to be really balanced and feel whole and feel good in your body and in your emotions and your spiritual connections, you have to be balanced in your masculine and feminine energy. Now, unfortunately, with a lot of women, the way that we work these days, a lot of women are in their masculine so much in the work zone that they're not in touch with their feminine qualities. But early on, my granddad working with me, I was learning how to channel energy, because as I'm sure you can probably tell, I'm a person with a lot of energy. And if I just sit and let that, what that's going to result in is too much thinking and then confusion. So I've got to get moving so I can get that energy out of my body in order to get a good night's sleep. So sports is a way that I can channel some of that aggressive energy and have fun and be competitive in a really healthy way. And I just have a real love for that. More than anything, I'm competing with myself, because I'm always looking to how can I do, and skiing is a sport where you're never going to beat it. I don't care how good you are, you're never going to beat that course. And so it's fun because you're like, I can do better today. How can I do more today? So I just have a real love for that. And I would say that that's a great way for women to engage in moving and channeling some of that more aggressive energy, because what we have not talked about is our sex life too. And a lot of people, if they're disconnected from their sex life, they're also not channeling that very, very powerful and important physical energy that's got to move through the body.
Yeah.
So that was a lot packed in there. Hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, we will come back to that, because that's something I wanted to talk about, that creative energy that comes from sexual energy. There's so much misrepresentation and areas that have been made to be people to be shameful about or guilty about, all this different things. So we'll come back to that. That's going to be a good one, for particularly how we redirect that energy into performance, whether that's sport, business, bedroom, whatever it is. You talked there about your granddad. I do work with young athletes, but mostly with their parents, right? And creating the sort of environment that you described there that is conducive to good performance. What was it about that experience with your granddad that made it so fun, but also got you to perform at that level?
I feel the emotion rising up in me right now as you ask that, because ultimately all goodness comes from love. It's all about love. It's all about love. And when we can put aside everything, all the chains that bind us, and say, I am going to show up in an attitude and in the presence of love, no matter what. Brilliant things happen, brilliant things. So I could feel my grandfather's love for me, the way that he cared for me, the way that he wanted to see me succeed, and his compassion and his gentleness. And so this is so important for men to know. My granddaddy was one strong dude. I mean, my sister is an artist, and she drew a picture of him as a child of my granddaddy lifting a bale of hay. And if you don't know anything about a bale of hay, that's not really even possible. That's like a really, really heavy deal there. And so he was so strong. He was a farmer and worked with his hands his whole life. And even up to his passing at age 94, he was so strong. My dad said, when he pulled me down to his bedside to whisper to me at 94, he said, you cannot imagine the strength that man still had. So we're talking about a strong physical presence, a masculine man. And yet the love and the tenderness that he could show, that right there means everything. And my father was also that kind of man. And what I can tell you guys, any guys listening to this, I'm going to tell you, there is nothing better than you can do for your daughter, for your wife, for the women in your life, than to love them and bring your masculine energy in a loving way, and forget about all of those things where you can't show emotions. Show it, let it out, show your love, because it means everything, and will make all the difference in the way that girl becomes a woman and relates to men. It will make all the difference in her life.
Absolutely.
And for boys too, to raise boys in a way where they're not fearful to be connected to people,
Yeah, because they're absorbing what they see in us, of either preparing them to be the man or preparing them to like the sort of man they want to connect with.
Mm-hmm.
I think the key thing that you said there is like we still need to have that strong male presence. I think there's been too much made of like men showing emotion, and it's become too far the other way, which is why men don't relate to it. But it's like it's strong physically, strong mentally, strong emotionally, but still allowing yourself that space to show the emotion. It creates what you described there. It creates an environment which makes you emotional thinking about it, because it was so special. And that's the opportunity we have as parents, as coaches, as leaders, to be able to create more environments like that to empower young people to be able to then go and emulate that.
We are really in need of strong masculine leaders who are, my father led thousands of people in his life. He was a youth leader for a long, long time. And then so many of those people, when they grew up, they were like, can you still teach us? And, can we still, if people would show up to the house, and he was just so loving that he just magnetized people to him. And he was never afraid to show his emotions, show his love for other people. And it didn't matter where we were. If we went to a restaurant, we went to the gas station, wherever we were, people were just magnetized to him because he was present with them. He was right there with them. He truly cared for them and was not afraid to show that. But he was all masculine, so there was just no fear of showing that part of him. And that's the difference between, I think, getting a little bit confused between what love looks like as an action and what love is like as an emotion, because they're not the same thing.
Yep.
People can get caught up in their emotions. And that's why a lot of men are afraid sometimes to really show that, because sometimes women who get caught up in their emotions and things get chaotic, and then men pull away when it comes to that because it's overwhelming. They don't know what to do with it. That's when love is more at an emotional level. But when you can take it up to a level of action and say, what does this mean? What action can I take right now? Where can I be useful? Where can I be helpful? And sometimes all you need to do is be present with that person. That's all you need to do.
Yeah. And as from someone like myself who I'm an extrovert, so I'd much rather be having a conversation. If I have to sit down and do more detailed focus work, sometimes I just need someone there. They don't have to say anything. It's just a presence, and that makes me laugh because I think about times where I ask my wife to help me with some detailed stuff, and she'll just stand there and I'll get started, and she'll stand there for a couple of minutes and she'll go, "Do you actually need my help?" I'm like, "Yeah, just stay there."
Tell her I had a coach who specializes in ADD and ADHD, which for me is the creative mind, right?
Yes.
And I had this woman who helped me years ago with some things, and a couple of terms that she taught me, which I really like. One is called a body double, and the other is called a believing mirror. They're basically the same thing, just a couple of different terms to help understand it. But that is literally for the creative mind or for the busy mind. When you have someone present like that, talk about that energy, it can bring scattered energy levels down and sort of level them out, okay, and clear some confusion. But it's just a body double. It's just somebody else there just to be there, and it changes everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to avoid the labels and the diagnoses and that sort of thing. But that was exactly what I learned is that sometimes with ADHD you just need someone there to be exactly what you described there. I love those terms.
Right.
Growing up, my believing mirror was my older brother. Created that space when I was like learning sport and creating that space, and much the same as what you described with your granddad. Really cool. If I can dig a little bit, because this is like from my own personal experience, but I also see it so much out there with dads and their children. My dad was similar in that he was a youth leader, and he was often helping so many other people. And at times I felt like I was sort of left out of that, which I guess is why my brother played a lot of that role. Can you identify with that disconnect with your dad to a certain degree because there's only so much of him that can go around?
I think I was going to say something that's really not true. At first, I was thinking it might be different with a father and a son, but not really, because there are plenty of daughters who, same thing, that their dad is so busy. I didn't have that. I mean, my dad I remember my sister asking him one day, and this is really, his answer is just really the essence of my upbringing. She said, "Daddy, how did you do it with two little girls who were loud and wild and, playing instruments and crazy around the house? How did you come home from a day at work and then deal with that?" And he said, "Oh my gosh, baby." He goes, "It was the favorite part of my day, coming home to you girls and your mother." And the thing is, that was real for him. So whatever had been going on during the day, he knew that his home, he and my mother created a home where this was the sanctuary, and it was first. It came first. So putting for my parents, God first, and then their relationship with one another second. So I grew up watching a couple who adored one another and were best friends until the end. So it wasn't a relationship of, oh, they've been married for 50 years now and it's just like roommates, like so many people. They were still spontaneous. They seemed like teenagers sometimes looking at each other because they kept it like that. So growing up in that environment, I always felt that I could go to my parents, that I could share what I needed to with them. And I really am very aware that I have very different upbringing than most people. a real blessing. And that is part of the reason why I feel so much desire to help other people, because I know that that level of love is real, that it's available, that people can create it in their homes and in their families, because I lived it. And so I want to say, hey, this is real and you can do this.
Love it. Tell me, if you get into coaching like you have, and a whole lot of other areas that you help the world, from my experience, there's always a backstory of what you've had to overcome to then end up in that space. Was there a particular moment or event that led you down a path of wanting to then help people?
I wouldn't say there was a particular moment, but life is a journey. So there are all these markers throughout our lives that you can point to. For one thing, if you talk to close friends of mine, and if I say something and I think, oh gosh, and I don't do this anymore, but years ago, I remember saying to a friend, I know you might think this is weird, but I woke up in the middle of the night and my grandmother was standing there in my room, who was deceased, by the way. And, there was a light around her, and all I could feel was just so much love coming from her. And it was such a real experience. And I remember my friend saying to me, she goes, why would you think that I'm going to think that's weird? She goes, you've been telling me things like that since we were children. I'm like, I have? And she's like, yes, Kim. She goes, it's not what you do, it's who you are. So you can't hide that. But the deal is, though, I really kept that under wraps, I thought anyway, to people who were not as close to me, because I thought they're going to think that's weird or whatever it is. Well, throughout life, there are markers where, somebody loses a parent, somebody loses a friend. And in recent years, so the last several years of my life have been heavy, heavy loss, including the loss of my only daughter, and then becoming my father's caretaker and being with him for several years until he passed. And I've been with a lot of people during their last days, or been with people while they were going through the last days of a loved one. And because of what's always been natural to me from childhood, I've seen that death for me is simply a part of the natural world we live in. So I'm very able to help people with grief. And so those things kind of come up very naturally. And after my daughter passed, I even created a course. It's called Beyond Religion, How to Pray and Get Answers, because I realized, what do people do if they don't have training in how to move through grief, that it can really get stuck and cause so many problems in a person's life? And it occurred to me that when you have certain abilities and skills, that's not meant just for you. That's meant for you to share and help others, because otherwise it becomes like, why do I have all this? Why is this even here? Oh, I see. It's meant for all of us.
Yeah.
So anybody who has a skill with anything, it's there so that you can help others along the way, because we're all in this together,
Absolutely. My example would be crazy stuff with cats pointing me to questions to ask and all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't want to have talked about a few years ago.
The cat is the actual interviewer.
The moment we addressed the book, she's gone and sat down there calmly and quietly.
Isn't that interesting?
Right.
So interesting.
So if we bring it back to that, because obviously that was a significant moment, when you are a young athlete growing up, how do you then transition into becoming a coach? One, I imagine was it coaching sport first and then into coaching people at a broader level, or how did all that unfold?
It's an interesting question, because if I put it through a timeline, again, it's all very natural, because it wasn't a choice so much from, it wasn't a choice from my thinking mind to say, hey, I know what I'm going to do. It was more a natural progression that people just came to me anyway. And I asked my dad one day, I said, I don't know why. This was, this is probably early 20s.
Yep.
I said something to my dad. I said, I don't know why people come to me and ask me about this, that, and the other. I'm like, why would they think I would know anything about that? And he said, because, baby, he goes, you have a way of being with people that they feel like they can trust you. And I'm like, well, yeah, which they can, so it's natural. It's not so much that they're saying, oh, I bet she knows about this. It's more that they're saying, oh, that is a person that I can tell I'm safe with her. I can trust her. I need to open up to someone. So maybe I'll ask her about this. So it's more that. So when people just come to you naturally, after some time, you have to, it's kind of like you notice, all right, if this happens naturally, maybe that's a clue that I need to say, yes, I can do this for you. So at that point, I did start engaging in some more training for myself. So getting a certification as a high performance coach, and which is not something that I needed. It's just something I wanted to do. It added a layer of help that I could give to people, because people come at problems from different angles. Some people may want a more, boots on the ground, solution-based approach to solving a problem. And I'm always going to get them to the point where they realize, though, that that is a surface level approach. We can do that, but it's not going to be where the power is. Okay. And so I've also taken a lot of different courses and spent really a lifetime diving into spiritual studies, so that I can look broadly at religions, but again, that when you get above the dogma of religions, you see that at the highest level, love is there, and love across the board is a high level of energy that doesn't need to be defined by certain rules within an organization. Not that those are not good for certain things, but studying that helps me be able to speak with a broader range of situations and personality types. And then also being an intuitive, there are just times when I'm around people and I know on an energetic level that they are reaching out for connection, and they may not be able to say that. And I don't ever say something to someone like, oh, gee, it looks like maybe you just lost your dad. I can feel his presence around you, because that could just freak somebody out. Yeah. But what I might say, if I'm picking up on that energy, is to just open a conversation that's just very natural wherever we are. Maybe point to something that we're both looking at. It starts a natural conversation, and I find that people just open up on their own, because all they want is to be seen, to be known, to be understood, to be loved. That's the basis for all of us. So again, it just goes back to being present. And when it comes to sports and music, because those are such a big part of my life, and music on the professional end, I noticed many years ago that my sweet spot, where I love to be, even more than being on stage, is in a room in rehearsal with the musicians that I've worked with forever. Because talk about being in a zone. We are communicating with one another on a deeply intimate level with no words, and we're learning things from each other and coming together in a way that when we do go on that stage, we know each other in this otherworldly way, so that if a snag happens, if somebody misses a beat in a performance, you don't stop and say, oh, wait, what are we doing? I thought we were doing this. We do that in the zone. It's like, oh, look, someone went there. Look what we're going to flow over here because they're there. Let's just keep flowing. And the audience never knows the difference. And we can look at each other and go, and acknowledge, but go, yeah, I got you, and keep rolling. And it's like lovemaking. It's this beautiful connected thing. And in sports, I noticed, you know what? With this obstacle course, I don't have to teach someone how to ski the obstacle course. They don't have to know anything about skiing, but I can bring them out to the obstacle course. And the lake where I ski is owned by a professional coach. And so I love doing things where I bring them out and give them a lesson with him. So they just have a day of fun, learning how to ski on 2 skis, even just getting up out of the water. And then I would do the second half of the day, like as a debrief, and people would open up and just talk about their business life or their marriage or whatever. This is like in a small group setting. And I found over and over that whatever they brought up, I would say, oh my gosh, do you remember when you were out on the water? What did he tell you about? And this light bulb would go off in them. They're like, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. And I'm like, right, it is getting in that flow pattern of communication with all that is. So it ends up working in every area of your life. And I find that fascinating. It keeps life always interesting and always exciting.
Yeah.
So it's like there's not an exact, oh, I went and I learned and I did this. It's more of an intuitive, oh, look, these are these layers. This goes with this, and this.
Yeah. and that comes back to the trusting the intuition of, well, here's the next logical thing, which is how I ended up with going from also working at Grief to now a sports podcast, because that was what life was showing me was where I needed to be. People reaching out from the sporting space. Like, yeah, it was a whole raft of things, but it's just following those nudges. And it's funny what you talked about there around the coaching. When I was like, I've been coaching in sport since I was a teen, but when I'm then naturally coaching in corporate and I'm getting people saying to me, oh, you're quite good at this, or they're getting people from other departments to come and do some coaching with me, and you go, oh, maybe I should be doing this full time. And it's amazing how, if you
see, as you're saying, you said something there when you were talking about sports just now. It's the entry point. So there are different entry points where we can enter in, because, going back to what we all need, being seen, understood, knowing that there are other people along the path who, with so much chaos in the world and so many people who are willing to tear others down, people need to know that there are people along the path who want to elevate you, who want to see the best in you, want to lift you up. And so for those of us who want to provide that, how do you get someone to engage in that? Because they may be coming from different entry points. Is it sports? Is it music? Is it in the corporate world, or is it in their business life? They're an entrepreneur. They own a small business. Is it through their marriage and they're having issues there? Lots and lots of different entry points, but all leading to the same place of elevating life.
Yeah. And what's like, if I look at it from that sport perspective, is I've never had a lot of people, even the guests on the podcast, saying, sport was my safe place. And always because they had a really influential coach who created that safe space that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you described there around the musicians, like that connected team, like the best performances that I can think of from a team perspective were always that.
Yes.
And it's part of what I like bringing to that sports coaching element is let's create that sort of connection, because that's when, even when it feels like a mistake, it ends up being perfect because you've just got that level of connection. And like you said, no one notices on the outside. It just looks amazing.
And it doesn't even matter anyway. Now
No.
you have to do your work and be prepared, because nobody cares about going and seeing a train wreck because nobody prepared. But when you do your work and you do prepare, and then you show up together, we all love seeing that connectivity, because as a performer, as a musician, the audience is also a part of that. That's one thing I love. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter if we were all up there doing our thing and looking great and performing great. If there wasn't an audience there to be in it with us, it works in tandem, then it wouldn't really matter. And if you have, we've all been to concerts where you see, or a sports team, anything, or a corporate team, where people are so siloed within themselves that they're not present with, and they're not understanding others within their team. And so you have all these individuals that are operating separately, and it doesn't work. There's no juice there. There's no soul in it. But when people can prepare themselves as individuals, and then they come to and see the others as also souls that are here to walk this walk or to play the game together, magic happens. And that, again, I'm going to say, because I believe it is so, so important. I've done a lot of work in this area, that when a husband and wife come together, there are way too many marriages where people are not having sex. Sex is the glue that makes things just problems that just disappear. Why? Because when you come together, and I have a lot of women who I've heard say, well, why should I give him sex? He's not doing X, Y, Z. And I'm like, girl, that is not what it's about. Okay. This is about coming together to go, let's give each other pleasure. Let's help one another enjoy this life and offload some stress and play together and have fun. And then, you know what? Whatever that stressful thing that was happening, it's like, who cares?
Oh, I'm going to cut this bit out. The men are going to love that clip. But it's true, right? Like, and I've coached a lot of men where that's exactly the case. It's like the sex stops, and then everything gets really challenging because there's a disconnect. And I remember one person saying, "Well, it's not that important, isn't it?" I'm like, it's pretty important, because if you're not able to connect on that level, well, then it's a path towards bigger problems.
Yes.
I want to come back to that, because that's the thing I wanted to talk about. But you talked there about the sporting perspective. Really important point. You're also connecting to the audience. So whether it's community level, where it's you engage the parents and the community, if everyone's on the same page, then that's when magic happens. That's what's happening at my local club now. They've had some people running the show for the last sort of 5-10 years that have done that. They've connected the community, and also drawn to one of the he's like the longest serving and most successful coaches here in one of our competitions. And I remember him saying, Wayne Bennett, for the Australians listening, he talked about how hard it was to win a premiership, or the championship, as you would call it in the US. And these things need to be present. And it was only about 4 or 5 things, but one of them was, and the collective will of the fans all pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know whether he understands that sort of energy side of things, or whether it's just something he's learned, or what it was. But that's something that struck me. I remember hearing that 10 years ago, and it struck me as like, wow, that's really interesting. He understands the power. And I watch the best coaches in the world. They engage the fans, not in a false way. Engaging the fans doesn't mean signing a few autographs and mentioning, oh, we need to have, no, they actually connect with them. And the fans connect back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people then feel like a family. We're a part of a movement together. We care about things together. And I think people really, really need that.
And musicians too.
Absolutely.
Like, you think about the best shows, you feel like you're there with them. It's a sort of a one-person show because they're connecting to you. And I've also heard people talk about artists, and they go, "Oh, I wasn't so good. Like, he was a bit boring." And what I took from that is actually there was no connection. No
No,
connection.
no connection, no soul, right?
So, Kim, let's bring it back to what you mentioned earlier on in the conversation, which is around sexual energy and how it's creative energy and how you can use it in lots of different areas. And what the note I took then at the time was to get some ideas for people. Yes, you've talked about the importance of having that connection with your partner, how that is very much a stress reliever. I loved how you described that. Well, what give him sex, like what he's not doing this and this, and it's like it's not making it unconditional, right? It's like, yes, there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. What's the importance of that, and how can people understand that, how they can use that energy, whether it's through intimacy or actually just how when they have that energy come through, which we all do at different times, sometimes randomly, sometimes not, how do they then channel that into a fuel that will help them across all areas of their life? Because I know this is an area of expertise for you.
Yeah, and who knows how this became an area of expertise. I'm going to say it was, it's like what I'm going to say it's divine guidance that led me to that, because at some point, I think the way that I was raised, I wasn't raised to be fearful of sexuality. And it wasn't like it was this major topic in our household, but there was also not any sense of guilt and shame or anything like that. So it was a non-issue, and
Yeah.
at some point, maybe in college, I recognized how many people felt so much guilt and shame around the issue of sex. And then I noticed, I'm like, I questioned, is this me or is this a thing? I started noticing how much it was connected to their thoughts about religion. So, I thought about that on and off, on and off. And then tying that in with my life as a musician, I've been in rock bands with guys for a lifetime. And rock and roll, let's face it, it's all about sex. Okay. So, and when I say that, I don't mean like the stories about dudes and bands going out and finding groupies. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the energy of it, because people can act like they don't know all they want, but all you have to do is crank that up. And if you listen to that bass, what you're doing is you're feeling a frequency that is matching in your body. So your cells are literally moving to that frequency. That movement is happening, and that creates stimulation within the body. So lower frequencies connect specifically to lower regions in the body. So we feel a stimulation. We're at a rock concert. It's like, yeah, baby, we're going to go home and boom, so, to not get too graphic on your podcast, right? So that's like just it's this awesome, beautiful energy. And if you think about, the energy of, let's say, higher frequency instruments like the flute or like violin, that tends to stimulate more upper regions. So think about it. If you're hearing the flute, you don't feel that in your lower body. You feel that it's ethereal. It feels light, and you feel it up here. And you can experiment with this. When you hear me talk about this, if it sounds foreign, just turn on some music and experiment with it, and you will feel what I'm talking about. Okay, crank up that bass, listen to some AC/DC, and then tell me if you're not going, girls got rhythm, right? So I'm saying the frequencies that correspond in our bodies, we can't get, deep into this here on the podcast, but are you familiar with the chakra system?
Yeah.
Right. So I figured you would be. And even though this wasn't specifically designed to do this book that I wrote, and let me see if I get in camera, this tattoo on the woman's back is designed to be the Kundalini energy that rises from that sacral region in the body. And as it does, then it connects to our spiritual self. So people who are really only in the spiritual area of thinking, and they think that maybe sex doesn't matter, or let's say if you're not in a place in your life where you're having active sex, we're going to talk about that as creative energy, because it's the same thing. Creative energy and sexual energy are the same thing. So if you're not having sex, and especially if you're a man, what do you do with that? It can become very frustrating, and men can feel a lot of aggression because there's no outlet. And then trouble can start happening when there's no outlet, right? In all kinds of ways.
Yep.
When they can channel that, though, into creative energy, and that could be through sports, it could be through music, it could be through a lot of different things, but especially moving the body in the lower regions. And then let me say for women, moving the hips, because our hips are ball joints. They're intended to move, and that creates health. When they don't move and they get stuck, we carry all kinds of stress in our hips. We need to get out and walk. We need to dance, get those hips moving and swaying, right? And so you're able to channel some of that creative energy, and you feel naturally better. And then that elevates your feeling of goodness about life, that life is good, otherwise that frustration sets in. So this is a really, really deep subject. And to write this book, I spent 10 years researching. I talked to ministers, therapists, couples, strippers, because this book is about the nature of God as seen through the eyes of an exotic dancer named
Yeah,
Eve.
right.
Named just Eve. And I didn't know anything about that world, but I do know about the world of performance. So I thought, I'm gonna have to do some research on this. So talking with exotic dancers and learning about their perspective on men and men who come into the club, it's like, what is that about? What's that energetic exchange about? And what can women learn from that? Why men might be seeking that, right? And so there are just that subject has so many spokes that we can't even begin to go into right now.
Okay.
But it's important.
Yeah. So if we break it down into some sort of tangible steps, you've already mentioned movement,
Yeah.
particularly lower part of the body. But what are some steps that they can take if they feel that energy of, well, if it shows up as frustration as you described? What's some steps some tangible, simple steps they can take to start channeling that energy in a positive direction that will help them some way?
Yeah. So, our brains and our spine, our nervous system is an energetic highway. Okay. So there are impulses traveling all the time up and down the spine, and we can experience this. And there's some information from the Heart Math Institute as well that talks about how people don't realize that the heart generates more electrical energy in the body than the brain does. And so the heart is informing the brain in the electrical system. So when you think about the fact that this isn't just, people can hear some of this and think, wow, this is all this woo-woo stuff. It's also science. So one of the things that we can do is going back to what we talked about earlier in meditation. When we feel frustration, and we may need to release energy. For me, I'm going to go to music. I'm going to do what I call dancing it out. You can see my drum kit back here too. I'll get on my drums and yes, let go. Okay. If I can't go skiing, then maybe I'll do that, or go out on a walk and just channel that energy. I'm literally putting the energy into the earth, and I'm connecting to the earth in a way where I feel grounded, I feel supported. And the Heart Math Institute talks about going out and actually laying down on the grass, because the earth's magnetic field comes up and it will wrap around us like a blanket and pull negative energy off of us. How beautiful is that?
Yeah, it's awesome. The science of grounding is incredible. And for those who like want an example they would understand is go to the beach,
Go to
walk
the,
with your shoes off along the edge of the water and tell me you don't feel more relaxed and don't feel
yes,
more grounded.
yes,
And sometimes you might even feel tired because it's the first time you've allowed yourself space to actually switch off. And again, those who like the science of things, if you do some research on very specific scientific data around, particularly like you said, the electromagnetic field of the earth and ourselves, we can recharge. We're literally like a battery that can be recharged through that grounding process.
that's what it is. And allowing yourself the time and space. I hear people, a phrase that I hear all the time, and unfortunately, it's used in a way that sounds virtuous. It's not. When you hear people saying, "Oh, I'm just so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy." And I'm like, that is a way of keeping yourself from grounding and from knowing who you are, what your real desires are. And the importance of knowing what your desires are is that it helps you understand how you connect to other people. Because surface level desires, while we may think, oh, that's what I desire, if you keep asking yourself, why do you desire it? Why? If you keep going down to the grounding place of the real why, it's so I can experience love, so I can be connected to other people. And so it's like, okay, Kim, how do you connect that to wanting a new Corvette? Okay, well, why might I want a new Corvette? Well, because it makes me feel a certain way. How does it make you feel? Well, it makes me feel powerful. It makes me feel like I'm free because I can go fast in it. And it makes me feel like I'm connected to it in a way that looks good, and it's aesthetically pleasing, and all of the reasons why. And then you go, well, why do you want that? Why is that important? Well, because why do I want to be free? Well, because I feel chained up. Why do you feel chained up? I feel like I can't be myself. And so if you keep going down to those foundations, you come to the place where we all want to really be able to express who we actually are. And there can be so many layers, such big, heavy blankets on top of that, from upbringing, from culture, whatever it is that says, oh, you're not that, you can't be that, that's not good, that's not right, which is where that sexuality piece ties into it. Because when you express who you are and you feel freedom and you connect to other people, it's natural to feel that connective energy. And when we get with the dance of masculine and feminine energy, and we want to connect with others of the opposite sex, especially, and, without going into all the different forms and ways that masculine and feminine energy can take shape, just for ease of this conversation, we'll say between men and women, between men who identify as masculine, women who identify as feminine. That exchange of energy is a dance. And in order to really be able to give ourselves to the dance, we have to feel free. And in order to feel free, we have to do the work of uncovering who we are. So if I don't know who I am, how can I freely give to my partner? How can I freely say, I am open to receive who you are and care for you completely, and vice versa?
So good. What I learned around the busyness trap is exactly what you were describing there. It's not a question of being busy. It's actually a question of priorities. And when
Mm-hmm.
you say you're too busy for X, Y, Z, what you're saying is they're not a priority. And when you look at it like that, you go, well, actually, yeah, of course those things are a priority. And so it's like, well, maybe there's some things that need to change. You need to actually
Mm-hmm.
make some time and space for those priorities. And one of the key things that you mentioned there is to get in touch with who you are. Like so many of us have lost touch with, well, who are we at our essence?
Yeah.
So I honor you for coming on and sharing you at your essence, and for allowing us to go into some of those intuitive rabbit holes, with the hope that it will open up some thoughts for people to think about who they are beyond that surface level and who maybe they, could become in the future. So just to wrap us up, Kim, we've talked about a number of different topics. In terms of creating more of what you like, what the listener or the viewer wants in their life, what's some, whether it be through, well, I ask it through this lens. For me, looking back over my journey of personal growth, I realized I actually learnt a lot of these lessons the first time in sport. How can you, what's some advice you can give to the people listening of how they can identify some of those key lessons that they've experienced so that then they can use those experiences to help them in the future?
Yeah, good question. I think that, I just keep going back to meditation. Meditation is this place where you allow yourself to experience what I've heard called, and I've experienced this myself, the witness. The witness is this true you, this place inside of you where this Kim and Ian, these personas that we see here, do not encompass the whole of our souls and everything that we are. And as we pass energetically into the next life and shed these bodies, what is that? Who is that? What is that soul? What is that spirit? So being able to know and see that that is who you truly are, that timeless being, that timeless energy that has a, let's call it an energetic pattern, a frequency to it, because it's not a personality, but it is an energy, that a signature that is you. My signature, my energy signature is different from yours, right? So it's a different frequency. And knowing what that is, and it doesn't have to get into an intellectual knowing. It's simply understanding that you're walking in this world in a persona. And in meditation, if you can get into that quiet space for just a few minutes, then you say, who is doing the meditating? Who is having this experience? Who is sitting here on the couch right now? It's more than the persona. So if you can get into those spaces for just a few minutes, you will start to see and feel and remember the goodness in your life. That is a thread that runs through your whole life. No matter what kind of trauma you may have been through, there's this river of peace and calm and goodness and love that's just always there. That trauma is something that's happened to us in this physical world. And yes, it can affect our psyches greatly and change who we are as people and the way we show up in the world. And yet there's this river that runs deep, 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 that is full of joy and full of knowing that we're connected to all that is and that all is well. So I would say, if you can spend those quiet moments, and if you have to start by reflecting on what is a time that I felt most like myself, what is a time where I feel today the most connected to my true self, and maybe nobody knows that person yet. Where do I feel the most connected? Where do I feel the most free? I wish I could be like that every day. Keep asking yourself, where do I feel the most free? And maybe it says, that time when I was in that cricket game and I scored, and it was like I just left my body and I was bigger than the whole game, and I was connected to everyone in the crowd. Oh, Who is that? Okay, where has that energy shown up before? Oh, remember when my daughter was born? And I felt like, wow, look at this. This is so much bigger than I am as an individual. And you'll start seeing these markers. So I would just say continue to tap into those high points that you've experienced in life, and you'll start to see a thread there. And then that thread can start connecting you deeper to who you are, and keep using meditation. And if you want to tap into further some of the tools and things that I have, go.kimberlycain.com. I've got links there for all kinds of things, all kinds of free stuff, but also those movement meditations that can help you get centered, and you'll find that place. You will find it.
Oh, so good. We'll make sure we get those links in the show notes if anyone wants to check that out.
Yeah.
It's a great answer. Meditation's had such a profound impact for me, and I'd never thought about it like that from that perspective. But you're right. It helps you connect to who you are, because of you come back to more of that calm, that focus, and connect to that thread. I talk about a thread as well from a bit of a different perspective, but it's true. It's like we have these key markers that they are essentially who we are. I talk through more from a business perspective of like, you're looking for what you should be doing in your business, what your personal brand is. It's that thread. It's exactly what you talked about. That it's those thread of markers of the great moments when it was just so effortless and it connected you to something bigger than yourself. That's where we find that purpose. That's profound. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your stories. Some real gold there, and I appreciate it.
This has been so great. It's been so fun connecting with you. I got to say, like I said, we need more strong masculine leaders. And anytime that I get an opportunity to connect with one of those souls, I'm like, keep going. Thank you for being in the world. Keep doing what you do. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Kim. I appreciate you too.
You're welcome.
Make sure you jump on to Kim's site and check out her free resources. Her link is in the show notes. Some of that stuff on intuition, I know everyone's experienced it, and you've had those moments where you've really felt other people's energy before they've even spoken. Whatever doesn't resonate, leave it behind. But if you can have an open mind, you'll get a heap out of that, including what we can learn from our animal friends as well. Meditation is a big part of what I talk about. As you know, Kim had some great tips there. I love how she talked about the simplicity of things. And if you're looking for more simplicity and you've already done a bit of meditation and you're looking to take that to another level, I'll make sure I drop the link in there for my performance meditation. I'll put the coupon in there so you get, I think it comes up at $11. So absolute bargain just for listening to today's episode. And you can connect deeper with yourself. A lot of what Kim was talking about today, and build more of that strength from the inside out. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.